So before we go, let's get into the news really quickly, okay? I'm done preaching. I'm done, giving you this spiritual experience where I pacify you about human rights. So the first story that I want to talk about comes from the nation's capital in Washington, D.C. Mayor Bowser has decided to expand the youth curfew with an eye to public safety. Again, this is very important. As for those who live in the DMV, particularly the District of Columbia or in that area, or who may travel in and out of the district, there have been several instances where more recently within the last, I could say 3 to 5 years, where youth have been either sought, identified, or held accountable for their transgressions, right? Oftentimes, again, youth can be perceived as being throwaways or juveniles or delinquents if they get involved into crime-related activities. However, children are still children and they are not throwaways. That's my perspective. So again, from a journalistic capacity, I covered that in an effort to improve public safety and prevent an increase in youth-involved crimes, the District of Columbia recently announced a short-term expansion of the youth curfew. On July 7th, Mayor Bowser released a public statement via Facebook declaring the intent of the law. Last month, before this law became official, Mayor Bowser actually advocated for the Juvenile Curfew Emergency Amendment Act of 2025. That was then taken to the DC Council's legislative meeting that happened on July 1st, and it was approved. Changes that are brought by this legislation include, but are not limited to, the following: adjusting the juvenile curfew hours to 11 p.m. during the months of July and August. This is particularly important because there seems to be a regionalized approach to this, where certain neighborhoods have flexible curfews that can be enforced arbitrarily or moved up to 8 p.m., while other areas of the Washington, D.C. Metropolitan area that are more commercial, might have more business activities, they will have their curfews. Those will either, again, be pushed earlier or they'll be moved later into the day, depending on, I guess, the whim of the D.C. officials. Other changes brought by this legislation include extending the applicability of the juvenile curfew to 17-year-olds. I believe 17-year-olds were excluded before. This legislation also authorizes the chief of police to establish a juvenile curfew zone. This will mirror the parameters of the popular drug-free curfew zone or drug-free zones of the Washington, D.C., the District of Columbia, that were brought about by the Secure D.C. Omnibus Bill that was signed by Mayor Bowser in March 2014. And last but not least, the new curfew, or as it's officially called, the Juvenile Curfew Emergency Amendment Act of 2025, also allows the Advisory Neighborhood Commission, or ANC, and the Business Improvement District, or a Main Street organization, to petition the chief of police to establish an extended juvenile curfew hour zone. So again, this legislation pretty much gives MPD as well as the city officials and governing stakeholders, I would say, more leeway or flexibility with enforcing curfews in certain segments of the city. Again, depending on who you are, you may think about one way or another about that. From my vantage point, again, I think that youth should not be criminalized. Youth should not be criminalized en masse. And this particularly, again, deals with youth who may be involved in the criminal justice or criminal injustice system, again, depending on how you feel about that. The next story, which is tangentially related to that topic, is a story about the Washington, D.C. identifying a need for a new jail in the District of Columbia. So again, our first story talked about the juvenile the Juvenile Curfew Emergency Amendment Act. The second story is more so focused on the need for new jails. This again deals with all populations. For those of you who may not have known or heard, Washington, D.C. currently has two facilities that are responsible for housing offenders or inmates. The Department of Corrections is located in Northwest DC, and the Department of Corrections is responsible for administering the Central Detention Facility, which is the CDF, as well as the facility that houses women or female inmates within the city. The Central Detention Facility opened in 1976, while the latter jail for women inmates was opened much later. So both facilities have actually been identified for having overcrowding. More specifically, the Office of the District of Columbia Auditor completed a report about 5 years or 6 years after the previous report, which was filed in 2019, which identified deteriorating conditions at the current jail, a current report stating that there are in-custody deaths, staffing issues, health and safety concerns, as well as mental health and substance abuse challenges. So these issues, again, have been rampant for at least, I would say, the last 4 decades. These issues are not new. However, they are still plaguing the current jail within the nation's capital. Based on the findings, the current jail is also, again, facing issues of overcrowding. Recent figures from fiscal year 2024 show that of the 7,508 people who were admitted, the median length of stay was 168 days for males, while the median length of stay was 59 days for females. So again, these things are issues that affect everybody within our community, whether we are committing crimes or whether we are not committing crimes. And I think, again, it is very important that we identify them and we try to work together to ameliorate these situations. That being said, the last story that I want to talk about also deals with the same population involved, again, in criminal justice issues, but particularly, again, focusing on the youth. There's a story that was recently published, literally the top of this week, focusing on supporting youth returning from DC correctional facilities. Again, this is the third story that I wrote, which I believe, again, also speaks to these populations. And before I let you all go on this lovely evening, I just want to talk to you about why this is important, and again, things that we can do to change this. Destiny, you need to get off that. You need to stop that. The name, you need to get off of it. Supporting youth returning from DC correctional facilities. Although there was a 75% decline in national youth incarceration between 2000 and 2022, you need to get off of it. Turn it off. Although there was a 75% decline in national youth incarceration between 2000 and 2022, at the end of 2022, there were about 27,000 youth offenders held inside of juvenile facilities across the nation, including detention centers, residential treatment centers, group homes, and youth prisons. Considering the high amounts of youth involved in the justice system, it is important for stakeholders around the district to recognize that we can all support youth who are returning from correctional facilities. In Washington, D.C., the Department of Youth and Rehabilitation Services, or DYRS, is responsible for the supervision, custody, and care of people charged with the delinquent act. DYRS works with youth who are committed by a D.C. Superior Court family court judge after adjudication, as well as while they are detained. Again, this is similar to the previous story where there are two primary jails, one for women, another for men within the Washington, D.C. area or within the district proper. There are also two primary facilities that house our youth offenders or youth who are involved in the criminal justice system. One is actually located in the northeast section or quadrant of the city, the Youth Service Center, or YSC. And the second is called the New Beginnings Youth Development Center, which is actually located in Maryland proper in the city or township of Laurel. So the YSC, or the Youth Service Center, is an 88-bed facility that accommodates youth who receive short sentences, while the New Beginnings Youth Development Center is a 60-bed residential facility that where youth receive longer term sentences. According to officials, the youth at both facilities are typically brilliant in one way or another. However, many of them have not figured out how to use their powers for good. So again, I encourage you to look these stories up. If you search my name, Daquan Lawrence, that's DAQUANLAWRENCE, across all platforms, Twitter, Instagram is Dr. Daquan Lawrence, again, as I am a doctoral candidate. On TikTok is DOC, Daquan, Doc Daquan. But yeah, all of these news stories are available, and please, if you're interested, again, in talking more about this, please email us at the WBGR network, or contact Freedom Fighters of the DMV for more information. Again, these are ongoing things. I have this perspective. For those of you who are with us from the beginning of the show, again, you see I do the international advocacy and diplomacy at the United Nations. I am due to receive my doctorate in spring of 2026. So that's about 4 and 5 years. So about 9 months from now, maybe 8 to 9 months from now. But again, I'm interested in all things human rights, social stratification, and empowering Black people, particularly here in the DMV and especially all around the world. And again, here goes the news brought to you and the freedom fighters of the DMV. Once again, thank you for joining us. My name is Daquan Lawrence. You can find me again on all socials at Daquan Lawrence. Oh, I forgot to mention YouTube. Very important. YouTube, Dr. Daquan, DRDAQUAN. On YouTube, Dr. Daquan, you can see some of my research. You can see some of the videos that I've made with the greatest students in the world that I've had the privilege of teaching, some middle schoolers who I love pouring into. So again, with that being said, thank you for your time, and